Welcome back to Beauty for Ashes. This is episode 3, and we're going to dive into the impact of therapy, how it's changed my life, my journey in therapy, and how it's impacted my spiritual growth, how it's impacted my relationship with God, my family, the whole nine. We're going to dive into it right now. So, a little bit of the background here is I did not initially, I wasn't like one of those people who were like, oh, I need to go to therapy. Let me schedule an appointment. No, life lifed, and I ended up in therapy, like last resort type of thing. And one of the things about therapy is this, like if you had an issue, say for instance, if you seen something on your body that was like abnormal or you were bleeding or something, you would go to the doctor because you would say, oh, obviously you've identified a problem and you're like, I need to go get it fixed. Well, we do not view therapy like that. We view therapy as like us just rambling on to some random person and in hopes they can help us. But that's not the case at all. The same way that we have to go to a doctor if we've identified a problem in our body, and we make that appointment and we feel like, oh, well, this is a doctor, they can fix it. Therapists are just the same. They're doctors who can fix things that you cannot see. And although it's not physical, like you can't pinpoint it, actually, I think mental health is probably more important because at least we can identify physical problems, right? We can identify, oh, I have a cold, or oh, I feel a strain in my throat, or oh, I'm bleeding on my arm, or I have a scratch here. We can see those things, but the things you cannot see, I feel like impacts you the most. And in my case, it did. I always talk about therapy. I in the past 2 episodes, I've talked about therapy. I've also talked about my therapist, Dr. Eve. So go back, watch those. But the lead up to this was still a little bit, I've shared my story already, but I never dove into the impact that therapy has had on me. So when I was younger, and I'm gonna say middle school is when I started to notice a change in myself. And of course, this is like teenage years, right? And we think we know it all, and everybody's the worst, and we're all the victims, right? Of everything, and everyone has done something to us. But literally, our frontal lobe has not developed at all. So in middle school, I started to change. And it started with the friend groups I would hang out with, because I would always hang around a rowdy bunch, right? And hanging around a rowdy bunch, and you already have a personality of rowdiness, only leads to detriment, okay? I remember in middle school, I was probably hell in high heels, because I was not listening to teachers, and this veered into high school, y'all. I'm gonna get into it. This veered into high school, so I'm like hell in high heels. I'm like getting in trouble at school. It was one situation where they said I caused a riot, and we had to go to court about it because it was like this whole thing. They did not want me and my cousin at the same school together because us together was just even a bigger mess, and that just continued on. Then I went to high school, same thing. It was at the point where I was in private school and I wanted to go to the school that my sister wanted to go to. And the school was like, no, we're accepting this child, but this one, we're not. So my parents had to like find me another school to go to because this school would not accept me. And when you go to private school, you have to go through a process where they accept you into the school. And they had to find me another school. So I remember even in ninth grade, I was like, if I didn't like what the teacher said, I had something to say. I had something to say. Was it right? No. Those poor teachers. When we talk about like teachers dealing with children, I'm that child. Because why? I don't know. I was acting out. And I'll get to why because we've delved into why. And I continue that. And then when I got into like ninth, 10th grade, of course, this is when we started having interest in boys. So I was like, not boy crazy, but I was like interested in them, and I wanted their attention and etc. So we're going through all of this. And remind you, these are the years that I'm the most insecure, like the most. Like I feel like everything about me is just not right. And I had all these thoughts in my head going on. And I think a lot of that, affected my approach and how I looked at things. So also because I'm acting out in school, I don't have the best relationship with my parents because I'm acting out. They have to come and get me out of situations. They're at the school all the time. I'm showing up late to school. Now, I never did the thing of like skipping school, but I did like sneak people into the house. I didn't do like hardcore drugs or like alcohol. I didn't do any of that. But as far as like just me, like texting past my curfew, me always going off, I was always like arguing back with my mom. Like she could say anything, and it's always a rebuttal. I never let it go. I never let it slide. Nothing slid. And it was the same way with like my personal relationships too. And my poor parents, they're not like rah parents. Like they're not like I'll put you in a chokehold. No, they're easygoing people. Like my whole family is. My grandparents, my everybody's just easygoing. No one is like rah. So, dealing with a child like me, they're probably like, what is this? And me and my sister is like black and white. Like she was probably what you would want for a child, and I'm what you get. So I continued on, and I'm like going through all of this, and then I was actually in some relationships, and I was getting hurt in those relationships, and I just felt like abandoned a lot. And I also felt like even in my immediate family, like I was an outsider. Like I'm like, no one understands me. Like I'm so much different than everyone else. I look different, I act different, everyone else acts accordingly. I'm not, I'm like rebellious. And I was also going through that phase where my grades weren't good because I'm switching schools, right? I'm not studying properly. I'm not, I'm like, studies are the last thing on my mind. And that's so funny because I literally go on to get accepted to law school. So I locked in quickly, but I'm going through all of this. So it was my 11th grade year, my 12th grade year. My parents found a private school that was for behavioral, or you had like behavioral issues. And this school is like very small and compact, and they only accepted like a small amount of people at a year for you to be a part of this school. And it had lenient rules, but they were also like your watchers, right? And I thrived here. Okay, this school was like it was a small group of us, a small class of us, and they would give us all of our assignments on day one. So the whole semester, or from like basically your August to like December, they would give you all of your package workload, and you would go at your own pace. The teacher would teach, accordingly every week to the lesson plan. But if you didn't finish it that week, or you went a couple weeks over, or you finished early, hey, up to you. So I was like, okay, I like this. So it taught you time management. It definitely taught you that, because you had to have it all done by a deadline. By this day, you had to have it all done. You had to have all your quizzes, tests, and assignments turned in by this date. And lucky for me, I was able to turn all my assignments in early. So it taught me a lot. And I did calm down at this school because I was looking at other children, and they had far more behavioral issues than me. And they were coming from households of families that they felt like didn't love them, or didn't check on them, or didn't care about them. Some of them came from divorced households, and we were just all over the place here. And I was like a stellar student, like in a room full of, we would call like rebellious kids. I'm like stellar. I even became president of that school my senior year. So I'm like, wow, look at all of this happening. So then finally I go to college, and I wasn't in the same stuff that I was in high school, but I was still doing the same, saying anything, acting anyway, still arguing with my mom a lot, to the point I know it was stressful and straining on the relationship. And I just felt like, I'm ruining all of my relationships because of my behavior. And I was, because no one has to deal with you, not even your parents. I know we're taught, and the society teaches us that our parents have to deal with so much of our drama. They don't. Nowhere did it say they have to. Now, granted, God is like long suffering, love is long suffering, and most of the time your parents aren't going to give up on you or throw you away. But it comes a time where sometimes they have to throw their hands up and give it to God. And when you get into God's hand, you do not want to be in the hands of an angry God, okay? God says, honor thy mother and thy father. He means that, okay? And I know they're like, well, the second scripture, says like, don't provoke your children, but the first one says honor them. So that means you need to do that first. And regardless, you got to keep doing it. I don't care about anything. Another thing that I never talk about, or maybe people knew, was that my biological father, he wasn't necessarily in my life my entire life. Like I knew him my whole life, but he wasn't involved at all. I remember him a little bit when I was growing up, like when I was a kid, because I actually lived in the city that we're from. And then when we relocated to a larger city, we came to Houston. Me and his relationship dwindled drastically. No, we were not calling each other every day. We weren't, we didn't have that type of relationship where we could talk about things. We did not have that relationship. I remember I called him one day and I was like, I want to move with you. And he was like, basically, no, like it's not the right time for you to move with me, etc. And that broke me. And after that is when I decided I wanted to like run away, and I like went off on my dad that has raised me my entire life. And I was like, "You're not my dad." And I said the worst things, right? And I'm trying to run away, and that I tell that story in the first episode, but I turned back around because of bugs. But that I didn't realize how much it impacted me. And of course, when you're young, we haven't processed these feelings. We haven't processed rejection or abandonment. But you start acting out when you are in middle school and high school because those feelings are still there. There is just you haven't identified them. You don't know how to identify them, um, and the traumatic part about all of this is you don't know why someone hasn't accepted you. You don't know why you don't have this relationship with someone who's supposed to be your parent. And you don't know how to even explain or express that. And I remember I would always argue with my mom a lot. And it was almost like it was misdirected anger. And she would tell me that she's like, I'm taking the flack about this because you're not dealing with what's really hurting you. And I didn't. And at that time, I didn't think that was because I'm like, how could this be hurting me? Like out of sight, out of mind is in the back of my mind. And the dad that I've been raised with, he's taking care of me thoroughly. I'm his child. No one knows differently. And he's took care of me my entire life. He's the one who taught me how to drive, bought my cars, sent me to college. He's done everything that you can think of that he's done, and he's loved me unconditionally. Even in the midst of all of this, it never changed his opinion of me. You could not tell my dad that I've done anything wrong. So when we talk about my biological father, he's the complete opposite. Like he's not showing up, he's not doing this, and it was like, well, whatever, like throw it in the back of my mind. So when I get to therapy, it's time to unravel all of this. It's time to unravel why are we behaving this way? Why are we getting to the point where we're so angry that we're going off on people? And it comes back to deep-rooted things: rejection, abandonment, feeling unloved and unwanted, because the people that brought us into the world are supposed to give us that, and they didn't, and we felt like we were missing that. So we went to try to find it. And when we try to go find these things in people or other things outside of ourselves, it's basically like we're building a house, we're building a house with sticks. It's going to blow down because it's no foundation there. And I always kind of looked for other people to fulfill that void. Oh, I looked for that in relationships. I looked for that in friendships. I looked for that. And when I didn't get it, it was always feeling like, oh, well, I just don't belong, or oh, they just don't like me, or oh, I will never have that. And that's just not the case. And going to therapy, it teaches us practical ways to handle these emotions, right? Because I stopped viewing it as I stopped viewing this as I'm the victim or this is something against me. And I started viewing it as, oh no, I need to give grace. Like I don't need to keep blaming people for what they don't know. Or I don't need to be holding this negative energy inside because, to be honest, no one has a manual book, and it's basically like I'm drinking poison expecting somebody else to hurt from it. And it's not happening because these people have moved on, I don't know if my dad thinks about it or not, but it's out of sight, out of mind. He's gone on with it, and it's something that's affecting me day to day. So I have to figure out how do I get past this trauma, and how do I do it in a way that helps me and heals me, not a way that I'm just throwing it to the back of my mind, but I actually have to uproot this, deal with it, and learn how to move forward from it. And if I see this again in my life, I can identify it and move on. And that's what we learned. And my therapists teach practical ways to do this. And I start giving a lot of grace. I'm like, he didn't know better. You know, He's only doing it as best as he can. And what he does do, if he shows or calls me on my birthday or holidays, then I accept that that's enough. It's enough because that's all that that person can do. And we also understand that we can't change people. We can't force people to change and we can't make them change. So the only thing that's in our control is how we behave. I can't control how other people act, but I can control how I act. I don't have to respond or react to all of these things. No, but learning grace, the same level of grace that we give to others is the same level of grace extended to us. So the more that we extend it for other people, the more is extended to us. And I'm like, hey, people can judge me too for my previous actions. People can think I'm the worst person too, and I've changed. So I'm like, if I can change other people, I can give them grace to change. And that doesn't mean it happens overnight. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen instantly. No, whenever it happens, it happens. Maybe they'll come around one day, but I have to allow that space for that to happen. And that's how I started going through life, is that I can't change people. This is out of my control. I can only control how I respond or react. If you do me wrong, I'm not getting a get back. I'm not seeking vengeance. If I feel like you've hurt me or if I feel those feelings of abandonment or rejection, I go and I pray about those feelings and I release that person and I forgive that person because holding it in only hurts me. They're not feeling it at all. So I move on. That's how I move through these emotions. And anytime that they're triggered, I go back. I give grace. I give grace. I pray, and we come back to the drawing board because these things are not. This is not how God wants us to feel. When we feel these emotions that's not of Him, that's the enemy implanting them so that we can respond based off of them. So we can continue living a life feeling like the whole world hates us. We can continue being victims. We can continue feeling abandoned and rejected, and we think that this somehow in some way excuses our behavior, and it doesn't, because at the kingdom in the kingdom of God, when you get to those gates, God is not going to ask us, oh well, what did so and so do to you? No. He's going to ask us, what did we do to so and so? And I don't it literally, if this is the worst person in your life and they've done the worst things, we still have to forgive them. We still have to forgive them. And forgiveness is not for other people, it's for ourselves. So going through therapy has taught me these little nuggets that have helped shape me. And these are practical things that we do constantly. Oh, if somebody cuts me off, or, sometimes I still get fluttered and, I'm not like jumping out the car and like beating somebody's window. I used to. I'm not doing that anymore. But, now I'm taking a breather and I'm like, okay, I don't know, maybe they have somewhere to go fast. Maybe they're heading to the hospital, or maybe they didn't see me, or maybe they did want to do that. And that's okay too. So it's allowing a lot of grace. Oh, if somebody's like, I'm at a drive-through window and they're like giving me attitude, or they're snappy, or they don't want to help me. Okay, I just continue on with what I'm doing because I can only control my response or my reaction and keep it moving. Because most of the time we will notice that all of this stuff that we are concerned with is only for that moment. You will forget it in the next moment. And now I know things are deeper. It's more traumatic things that I was taught in therapy. The things that we continue to remember are the most traumatic things to us. So those are the things we usually have to deal with immediately, and they usually take time to unravel. But anytime we continue to remember something and it replays, it's trauma, and we have to heal from that. And the only way that I've seen that I've been able to truly heal is from the Word of God and practical ways of living in this life, like the double whammy. I've needed both. I've needed to sit down, talk it through, because when you go to therapy, they don't know you from a can of beans. They're just pretty much analyzing you, hearing what you're saying, and then giving you basically your assignment or a way out, and they're telling you, hey, try this. This is what you should do, or this is how you should think about it, or this is how you should look at it. And that's helpful because most of the time we're like trying to figure out, well, how do I do this? Or like, how do I change? How do I get past this? And they're going to teach you that. A good therapist will teach you that. And also my therapist also teaches us the practical and also how we move spiritually, because if it doesn't line up with the will of God, or it doesn't line up with the character of God, then how we're responding or reacting is wrong. And that's very important. So please join me next week for episode 4. Again, like I said, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to talk about these stories because I think that they're very important, so you know that you can change. It is not the end of the world. The worst of you, God said, can be redeemed. He's a redeeming God. He's redeemed me, and every single day I'm striving more to be like him. I fail daily, but I'm not going to stop trying. I'm faithful to him. I'm faithful to God because God has been faithful to me. And I sin and I go back and ask for my forgiveness, and God forgives me. And that's what I want to encourage you on this journey. So, thank you for joining me. Bye now.